Today we're going to show you how to make beer.
Hi, I'm Brian.
I'm Jerica, and you're watching City Steading Brews.
And today we're making a porter, which is really just an improved version of my brown ale, maybe a little bit more alcohol, quite a bit darker, and little teaser, it shockingly tastes like Guinness. So to make beer, really simple. This is a raw ale method. So if you've never seen that, that's another thing you want to watch for. This is the way I make beer all the time now, and it's awesome. What I have right now is a big granite-ware 3-gallon container filled with 1.5 gallons of water. The reason there's 1.5 gallons in there, it's a little more, it's like 1 3/4, is I'm making a 1.5 gallon batch. Why 1.5 gallon batch? Because I felt like it. Because it's a 2-gallon bucket. I didn't want to fill it all the way because bubbles and foam and it gets all over the place, it makes a mess. So 1.5 gallons. A little more than a gallon, a little less than 2, right? It works for me. We have over here a heat controller, heat and cool controller actually, but I'm only using it on heat. I'm gonna have a link to this in the description. This is a really cool item. It's like 30 bucks. And what it does is, here's the story. I tried using my sous vide immersion circulator to make beer. I killed it in 2 brews. It's done.
It worked beautifully.
Oh, it did. It really did. It worked awesome.
But the sugars and the grains
They
got
just got
up
in there.
in the filtration part, the one that circulates the water. And
Yeah, it killed it. So it doesn't work anymore. So what I did is I got this heat controller, and it has a probe here that, it's a thermometer probe, and I drop that into the water. And then in the heating element side, I have a heating element, which I can show you real quick. You can hear it sizzling. That sucker's hot. It's heating the water, okay? What I'm heating the water to, this is gonna be a little bit surprising. I'm heating the water to 175 degrees.
Now, some of you who homebrew yourselves are probably going, what?
Well, I'm gonna do a boil and bag method. So we're gonna put a bag in there, we're gonna dump all of our grains in. That's gonna drop the temperature by about 10 degrees or so, give or take. And this is a boil high brew, okay, or a mash high, sorry. This is a mash high brew. So it'll be 165 mash in temperature. And you might be wondering, why so high? Anywhere from 145 to 165 is considered a normal range. The lower you go, the more alcohol you're gonna get out of those grains, the less body and mouthfeel, okay? The higher you go, the less alcohol you get from the grains because the sugars are a little bit less fermentable, but you get a better mouthfeel and you get the deeper, richer, that's what I want. So I mashed this at 165. By the way, this is the second time I'm making this recipe, and I did that on purpose. I made the recipe up after experimentation and got this recipe working so beautifully. There's only one little addition that I changed, and that's a recent thing I'll explain in a little bit.
So in case you're confused by what Brian just said about getting more alcohol out of the grains, we're not actually getting alcohol out of the grains because that's not how this works. We're getting sugars that get created into alcohol.
You get more fermentable sugars at a lower mash temp, and you get less fermentable sugars at a higher mash temp.
Just to be clear.
Yeah, she's right. Sorry, I got my mix all talked up. I do that from time to time. Anyway, I'm trying to keep a bunch of numbers in my head so I don't forget. Okay.
So we have everything that we need.
Yes. Now I'm going to go through all the stuff that we need for this beer. First, you're going to need now this is for the 1.5 gallon recipe, by the way. You need 1 pound of 2-row pale malt barley. Just standard stuff, nothing fancy. You're going to need, I have notes, I'm just going to look at them. You need 1/2 pound of crystal malt, which is actually right here. And if you look at that, see how dark that is compared to the 2-row? That's the cool thing.
And
it smells awesome.
It gives a really nice caramel-like flavor.
Yeah, it's like a roasty caramel flavor. And then we have 1/2 pound of white wheat as well. That's in there mostly for like mouthfeel and a little bit of flavor, make it almost creamy. Like those of you that like Hefeweizen and all those kind of beers are really gonna appreciate that, which, speaking of that, I'm gonna be doing a kit of a Dunkelweizen soon, not today, but anyway. So now I got you all excited about that. Let's go back to this one. Then also 4 ounces, which is a 1/4 pound of roasted barley. Now that again is really for color and a little added flavor, okay? And that's it. What we are also going to do is add 0.3 ounces of Cascade hops. Now I know those of you that do beer regularly are going, if you're doing a no boil or a raw ale method, how do you get the hops to bitter? Good question. I have a pot over here with some water in it. I'm gonna take my 0.3 ounces of Cascade pellet hops, and if someone asks me why I'm using Cascade hops, I bought a big bag of it. So that's what I use until they're gone. Then I will try other hops. For right now, I'm gonna use Cascade. It's what I used the first time that worked wonderfully. I'm gonna put this in some water, put this on the stove, let it come to a nice low boil, about 30 minutes. It doesn't matter if it steeps longer. Turn off the heat, take it off the heat, let it just sit if you need to, it's fine, okay? By the way, you can see some steam coming off the water now. It's at 119.6 degrees. I'll be right back. Okay, so now that we've gone through some of that, the first thing that I really like to do when I'm starting up a new brew is I want to hydrate my yeast. So while our water is still going, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna be using Safale SO4. Why am I using this one? I bought a 20 pack of it and I still have some. So that's part of it, and this is a wonderful ale yeast. It's a really great ale and beer yeast, so it's very useful. So I'm gonna use my handy dandy Swiss Army knife and cut this open. Now, how much yeast am I gonna use? Those of you who are longtime viewers of the show probably already know the answer to that. And no, it's not 1/5 of a packet, it's actually about half. Because I've recently changed my idea on that. So what I'm gonna do is just dump roughly half this packet in here. And the other half, I'm gonna fold that up, hand it to my lovely, I hate to call her an assistant because she's my partner in crime here. That gets taped and put in the fridge because that way it lasts longer. Okay, and I put that into some water. It was a little warm, like maybe 105, 110 degrees. I'm just gonna give that a little stir. All we're doing is hydrating it, just getting some water in it, activating them, waking them up, however you wanna see it.
The temperature of the water isn't that crucial unless it's too hot.
Right, you don't wanna go over 115. You really don't wanna go below like 70 either, because too cold stunts the yeast. You wanna make them happy. You wanna wake them up, get them all comfy and warm and get them going, you know? So, some of you might be wondering, why am I using such an odd way to heat up my water? Well, I tested this the other day, and I actually did it with the boiling bag in there. I found that with the element, it was a little scary because I didn't want that element to touch the bag. I also couldn't get the heat into the grains as well, so I'm not really gonna be super anal about it today, but what I am gonna do is leave the temperature probe in there so I know what's happening. I feel that for a 1-hour mash, this is gonna be just fine. All we're gonna do is pop a lid on there and it'll stay. Even if it drops down to like 155 by the end, that's still well within mash temp range, right? Now, I want to talk about something that's going to be going into this beer that I don't normally use. And there's a reason why I don't use it, and there's a reason why I'm going to use it. And that is lactose. We have a 1/4 pound of lactose. You probably noticed this funny white powder in the corner. I am adding that because when I made this beer the first time, as wonderful as it was, it lacked a little bit of sweetness. It just, at the end, needed just a little bit more. Now, if I had put sugar in, or more grains, I would have made more fermentable sugars and just made a higher alcohol. Not really what I'm after. I wanted that residual mouthfeel and sweetness, and that's how you get that, is by lactose. Those of you that know our channel know we're very into doing this as natural as possible, but we're also practical and, you know, somewhat reasonable. We do live in a city, so things that we can get in a city that are easily attained without being truly chemical additives, we're gonna try to use them. When I looked into how lactose is collected and gotten into this form versus how white sugar is collected and gotten into that form, I saw a lot of parallels, and I didn't really see a lot of differences, and I didn't really see a lot of things with this that would make me not want to use it if I'm already comfortable with using white sugar. So that's how I came to it. Plus, it's a really nice way to not have to pasteurize everything. I did some testing. I took some of this and dissolved it in water and tasted it. You know what it tasted like? Sugar water. I didn't taste milk. I didn't taste anything that would make me think of milk. It's sugar. It was wonderful. It was a great day for me. So I decided this beer needed a little more sweetness. That's why that's going in there. I'm going to put it in during the mash in, though it doesn't actually matter where you put it in the timeline. So a little bit about the raw ale method. If you talk to some people in Europe, they will say, why do you boil your beer? Now, back in the day, beer was boiled for a couple of reasons. Some of them made sense, some of them not so much. The one that makes sense is they might have not used the best water or the best grains, but in a lot of cases they really did because they wanted to make a good beer. Now the home brewer may not have had access to great stuff. They might have used grains that were on their way out. They might have used water that, you know, they washed last night's dishes in or something. I don't know, I'm making this up, I don't really know. So they boiled it to get rid of anything that might be a contaminant, okay? And that makes sense. Today, we're cleaner, we don't really have to worry about such things, and the mash-in process is pretty much pasteurization anyway, so not really a problem. The other reason that they boiled beer, though, is kind of funny. You know, like when you're boiling stuff and the bubbles that come up, they thought that that's how you made beer carbonated. So we kind of know that that's not true, and actually it's the opposite because all the oxygen is leaving the water, so not really a good way to carbonate a beer. But that's what they did it for, and that's what they thought. The raw ale method is actually basically very, very simple. You mash your beer, which is just using the alpha and beta amylase enzymes already in the grains. You activate them by heating them to a certain temperature, and they start converting starch into sugar, which is what the yeast consume to make beer. You do that. Once that's done, you put it in a fermenter. That's it. Add your yeast. You're done. It's a very simple thing. This has taken beer making from an all-day process to me for to a couple hours. It just makes it so much easier. Why do I use the big bucket versus doing it on the stove? I do it both ways. It really depends. This particular graniteware can't go on our stove because it has a concave thing. We have a glass top stove, so it can actually crack your stove. It was intended to be used with something else that didn't work out. So I came up with another system that might be working out, and that's what we're using today. Our water is just about there. In fact, it's close enough that I'm going to unplug it and we'll start moving forward. All right, so the element comes out. Now this thing's hot.
It's really hot.
It's really hot. Hear that steam? So I'm just gonna set it over here on a pan to let that cool. All right. Now I'm leaving the temperature gauge in there. We have our boiling bag right here, which it's just a nylon bag. We actually got them on Amazon. I'll have links to them if you want. It is just a bag made for doing this, okay? And we're just gonna set it over the side just like that.
We did have it in...
Oh yeah, it's been sanitized.
We did have it in the sanitizer.
In what? What did we put it in?
The red bucket and then we let it, or I wringed it out real well, and then I let it sit in our fermentation bucket to let it dry out a little bit.
Right. Now all we're gonna do is I'm gonna take all of our grains and start putting them in. This is the 1 pound of 2-row. I'm just dropping it right in. I'm gonna hand that to Derica. We got our 1/2 pound of white wheat. They're all malts, okay? And they've all been cracked, which is to say they're not a powder, but they're kind of broken. Best way to say it. Then we have crystal malt, 1/2 pound, if you're keeping track. And then we have a 1/4 pound of roasted barley. And at this point, I'm also going to add the lactose. You can add the lactose just before bottling. You can add it after the mash, during the mash. Almost makes no difference whatsoever. And it's not going to change anything for carbonation, just in case somebody thinks, because it's a non-fermentable sugar. That's why this works. It keeps a sugar level, a sweetness level that doesn't ferment out. So you get a sweet product in the end without having to pasteurize. Win-win, right?
So you can see with Brian's line of thinking that there may be more uses for lactose in our brewing future.
Yes. Okay, so once you have your grains in, you want to give this a good stir because nobody likes dough balls. It's just a bad thing. You don't want clumps of dried up grains that never get extracted because, you know, you paid for these grains. You're spending all the time doing all the work. You want to make sure you get the most out of them. So I'm just giving this a stir. Now, time is important here because see all this steam coming off? That's heat too. So pop the lid on there. What we want to do is let this stay as warm as possible. Right now it's 166 degrees, okay? I'm gonna let this go for 1 hour. At that time, it's gonna drop temperature. It's gonna drop to probably 150.
I'm gonna go grab a towel or a blanket so we can try to keep some of that heat in.
So we just put some towels around this to try to keep it warmer. They make all kinds of crazy contraptions to do this. We're just gonna wrap it up. It's already dropping a little bit and it's okay. We'll be back in about an hour. See you then. Okay, so it's been a little over an hour. We had some weird things happen. Like the temperature started dropping really, really fast all of a sudden. So we wrapped it in some more towels and it was still dropping. But as we moved it, then the temperature jumped like 10 degrees according to the thermometer. So I have actually tested this thing before. I believe it's accurate. I just believe where you place that probe is very critical. So because it dropped so much, I took everything off, pulled the bag to the side, dropped the heating element back in, then it made it a little too warm, so I unplugged it and left it off. And right now, it was dropped down to 161 degrees. We just moved it around a little bit and it's at 168 again. So, yeah, I think it's okay though. So that just goes to show you how finicky thermometers and temperature can really be. Is the middle of that grain bag 168 degrees? I don't think so. I'm coming up with other ways to make beer too. I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel or anything, just trying to come up with a nice, simple, reliable method. And I'm pretty sure I'm just gonna have to get one of those big igloo coolers at some point. I don't really want to have to do it that way because I can't put my heating element in there, so I still have to heat the water separately, put it in there to... It just turns into a mess. And this is why I don't make a lot of beer, even though I'm starting to really like beer. Okay, so I'm going to take the lid off and hand this to my lovely assistant who's going to put it over on the side or somewhere. And I'm going to take the heating element out, which is, you know, it's been off for a while. It's just hot. I'm going to set that over here. You want to make sure you wash that real good because stuff gets stuck to it and it's just not good. Then temperature probe comes out. Now, what we have here is our wort, okay? We also have this big bag in here. Now, one of the reasons I like this particular container, because I can pick this up, let those grains drain, say that 3 times fast, and it came with this nifty little basket that we can just set it in there and they drain in. Now, because I'm only making a 1.5 gallon batch, it doesn't touch the bottom. It lets everything drain out. They say you don't really want to squeeze this bag too much. Now, I like to push a little bit on it. It's hot though. The reason I do that is because all the water will not come out. I am not sparging. Now, some people might have a problem with that. Let me explain why. When you do a boil and bag method, you generally really don't sparge. I started with the amount of water that I needed. And you're gonna say, oh, but there's all these sugars. Well, I kind of tested that theory. The last beer I made just the other day, I didn't sparge at all. I barely even did this. And I hit my target gravity. So, I don't know if that means that sparging doesn't really work, or if I just did something very right, or if I got very lucky, but it was the same.
Now we have to remember, because we've already added the lactose into this, that's going to affect our gravity reading.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But we have to remember the amount of lactose we put in and how much that will affect the gravity reading to know what the gravity is for what is fermentable versus what is the actual gravity reading.
Actually, it'll be about 10 points.
If that makes any sense.
Okay, so what I'm trying to do is just get a little bit more of the liquid out of here, or a lot more, whatever you want to say. And I'm twisting it up, pressing a little bit. I'm not going too hard at it. I can hear some liquid coming out still. I want to get most of it out. You know, we don't want to waste anything, because this is where your sugars are. This is your fermentables right here coming out. Yes, I do. I think we're just going to drop it right into this pot here. That was probably not a good thing to do.
It's not going to fit in this.
Yeah, it is. It'll fit. We can do it. Mostly. It's hot. See, look at that. She didn't think it would fit. So now we're done with this guy. And now what's left is the wort, okay? And I want to get that into this. So this is where we get a little bit dangerous here. And I'm just going to dump this in. Don't get burned. Ta-da! So now we have our wort. Unfortunately, it's very hot right now. So what I am going to do though is remember we talked about the hops tea that we had to make. We didn't call it hops tea, but that's what it actually is. That was boiled for about 30 minutes or so, and it's just been sitting. It's actually cooled. I'm going to dump it right in here with that and give it a little rinse out so it's all in there. And that's how you still bitter your beer, by using hops, by making a tea. While we were waiting for this to steep, I actually looked up a whole bunch of different methods, and there is a guy in Estonia that did exactly what I just did, and he makes what's called farmhouse beer. It's actually the same idea. I'm going to use this temperature probe again, and I just want to get a temperature on this. You do not want to pitch yeast until your wort is at most 115 degrees. Right now we are at over 140. This is where people will use a wort chiller, which is just a bunch of copper tubing and they run water through it and it cools things down really fast. I don't have one of those. Someday maybe I'll make one, but I'm not all that worried about it. What I'm probably going to do with this is I'm going to go fill my bathtub with about that much water, set this in it, cool it off in about 10 minutes. And we're back. Okay, so this went into my bathtub, as I said, and you can judge all you want, but I bet you have a bathtub, but do you have a copper coil cooler thing? Maybe not. So that's how I do it. For small batches like this, it really doesn't matter. It took, what, 10 minutes? 15 minutes tops? It's not that long. It is cooled down to about, it was, well, let's just find out, shall we? 109. 109. I'm good with that. Basically, you don't want it to be over 150. I mean, some people will say 120, but try to keep it below that. So what we're going to do right now is notice the yeast. See that nice foam? That means it's alive still. And they're just probably waiting to be dumped into something like this. So they're ready for this. Hear that? They're already alive. They're working. This is called pitching the yeast. I don't know why. I would think it'd be called pouring the yeast because I'm not pitching it. I mean, that would be sloppy and I'd probably miss. So I'm just going to dump the yeast. Now, you don't even have to mix this through. I mean, it's probably not a bad idea, but you don't really actually have to. I'm going to, because I want a consistent batch here. And what we're going to do next is take a reading. Now, by reading, I mean a hydrometer reading. Why do we take hydrometer readings? Glad you asked. Multiple reasons. One, so that we know how much sugars are in there. We can find out if I actually got the same amount of starches out as I did last time. And two, it helps us in calculating final gravity. Helps us in calculating alcohol by volume when we take a final gravity. What it also does is, if I know that this is X number and it only drops by a few points over a week, something went wrong. Otherwise, I have no way of knowing where it's at. It's kind of like getting an inside look into the brew. Think of it that way. But I'm just going to take a measurement here. All I do is take my handy dandy turkey baster and put some liquid mort into my handy dandy graduated cylinder. And I know I don't have the hydrometer in the tube already. I can do it that way. I know. I never do. I don't know why. It's just a thing. Don't get too worked up about it. It's okay. I've gotten over it, so can you.
We also are aware that temperature does change things.
Not by a lot. For instance, there's a calibration on our hydrometer. It's probably 68 degrees, they usually are. Does it even say?
I think it says, because
I don't know, I can't read it that tiny. But it's probably 68 degrees, okay? And all that means is that at 68 degrees, this is the most accurate. Once you go above 68 degrees, it becomes less accurate. There's charts online you can find out. Basically, it might be a couple of points if we're 30-degree difference. It's really not that big of a deal. If anything, there's a little more alcohol in there than we thought.
Chance for alcohol.
At the end.
Oh, right.
So, last time I made this, the wort came out to 1036. This time it came out to 1042. I like that number better. 42 is just a better number overall than 36. So it's 1.042, which means there's a little bit more chance of higher alcohol content. And okay, what could have caused that? Maybe the grains were a little bit more...
Well, remember.
What?
what does this have in it that the other did not?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I forgot about that. The lactose, quarter pound, lactose works about the same way as white sugar. So it's 46 points per gallon. I did 1.5 gallons, so 46 divided by 3, it's about 31, and I did 1/4 of that, so yeah, we're talking like 8 points. What do you know, 1042 minus 7 to 8 points? Not that far off of 1036 from the original time that I did this. A variance of a little bit of water can make all the difference in the world, so for all intents and purposes, this came out the same as last time. Don't get worried about a few points of gravity. It's not that critical. This is science and art. I didn't measure 1.5 gallons of water. We went, oh, that looks like about halfway up the pitcher, and then we basically heated it for an hour. Some of it's gonna escape. It's okay. See this? This is good wort. See this? This was a very clean, sanitized tube. Guess what I'm gonna do with this? Those of you that say you can't do this or you shouldn't do this, I wanna know why. Someone said on our last video when I asked why, they said it's because people can't pour it as well as I can. Well, that's a big bucket. If you can't get it in there, go ahead, dump it in. What you're getting is a little bit of hops there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's some hop sediment in the bottom of that. It's okay, the hops don't need to stay in there. I did put the hops right in here, so we do still have all of the hop stuff in here. It's okay, it settles to the bottom, it'll get filtered out when we do the racking. But anyway, we have wort. This is becoming beer. Right now that the yeast is in there, technically it's beer. You'd have to drink a lot of it to get drunk at this point. Probably all of it and then some. And you'd probably be sick long before you got drunk because the hops and the yeast, not so good. But what we're gonna do now is I'm gonna take the lid, I'm gonna put it on, and we're gonna get an airlock. You know what an airlock is, right? It's that thing where water goes in, you know, bad stuff goes out, no bad stuff comes back in. They're $2. We're gonna take an airlock, put it on this. I'm gonna put this under the desk of fermentation, which, for those of you who are wondering how many things are under the desk of fermentation right now, I get asked this all the time. Right now, there are, let me think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 fermentations under the desk of fermentation, but I also have 2 on the counter and now this one. Also, if you like what you saw here and we didn't babble too much for you and you know it was good content and you found it interesting, we do work off of the support of others. So in order to do that, we have created what we call the VIP Club. What you get out of that is the VIP Lounge, which is a super secret, well, it's not really secret, but it's a super exclusive group only for our VIP Club members. And in there, I generally, almost every day, do something goofy or make a video or something that I share with our patrons and our VIPs. And it's the easiest, most direct, most efficient way to contact both of us because we do monitor that group a little bit more closely than the other things that we do. We're bottling beer. Today we are bottling my porter beer. Now, it's not a full-on tasting and everything video. We're just basically getting it from the fermenter into these lovely bottles with our fancy schmancy labels that we still haven't taken off.
And prepped so that they can carbonate.
All right, so the first thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna rack this out of this fermentation vessel into this vessel so that we can add our priming sugar. More on that in a second. We wanna put that about halfway down, get the pumping started, because that way you don't agitate the silt on the bottom. And I probably should make sure that this doesn't spit out at. It smells really good. The hops, I definitely smell hops in this. Almost fruity. Shouldn't be fruity, should be chocolatey and roasty. A couple of things about racking. With beer, you generally will rack once, okay? You'll rack it when fermentation's complete, which in this case, it's been almost 3 weeks, so we know it's complete. It was done probably after 4 or 5 days, but we haven't had time to get to it. So you rack this once, then you prime it, then you bottle it. I'll get to the priming in just a moment, but I just wanted to make that distinction. With meads and wines, sometimes you might rack more than once, but you still don't do your first rack, no matter what it is, until fermentation is complete. A lot of people have been saying, oh, I racked after 4 days. There's no reason. There's just absolutely no reason. And if they think because they put fruit in that it's gonna mold, it's not. There's so much CO2 building up in there, it's not gonna mold. you'd really have to mess up badly for your fruit to mold in primary. Now in secondary, it totally can, so be careful there. But that's another show. So the next thing that I want to do is take a reading on this, just kind of to get an idea of where it is. It started out at 1.042, which is not the highest gravity in the world, but that's why it's a porter and not a stout. Because originally stouts were called stout porters. They were literally just a porter with a little bit more alcohol. Now remember, we did add lactose to this, so that's an unfermentable sugar, and that's why this did what it did. It actually stopped at 1024. That comes out to about 3.4%. Actually, no, I'm sorry, 2.4%. And then I usually add about 0.5% roughly for carbonation because it's going to chew up some of that. So we're at like 3%, which means you can drink a lot of this beer. That's kind of a good thing. Anyway, so I'm going to take this back out. Let's put that into the stuff. And I'm going to pour this back in carefully down the side just to not oxidize too much. Did I spill?
Very close.
I didn't though. That's the important fact. Okay, the next step, really simple, is we're going to add priming sugar. Now, my general rule for beer with priming sugar is 1 ounce or 28 grams by weight of white plain old sugar per gallon of beer. So we have 1.5 gallons here, 42 grams. I just really like that number. I'm just going to put it in there, get out a spoon that's been sanitized, and I'm just going to stir this up. Now the idea here is we racked it off the sediment and the tube and things like that so that there's no gunk in our beer. And now I can mix it properly. You want to be a little careful because you don't really want to add oxygen to this at this point, but I think there's enough gas coming out, I can see it, that I don't really have to worry about it. But I do want to make sure I dissolve that sugar. Now, there's a couple of ways to do the priming, and the reason we do the priming at all is this beer is done, okay? It was finished fermenting, done. Nothing would happen. If I put it in bottles, it would not get bubbly. It would not carbonate. By adding more sugar, I'm giving the yeast something to work on because this is far from yeast tolerance, so the yeast have something to do. Just that little bit that we gave it is enough to give it bubbles and just pressurize it, basically. Now, some people will say, oh, I put a teaspoon of sugar in every bottle. Here's my problem with that. Measure out 10 teaspoons, and I mean literally, measure them, weigh them. You'll see a variance in them, and that's not a good thing. You definitely do not want variance, because that means some bottles might be overcarbonated, some might not be enough carbonated. By putting it all into this as one batch, I'm guaranteeing the most consistency across all the bottles, because as you see here, we have some larger bottles, some smaller bottles, and some teeny weeny bottles. I don't want to have to try to figure out what goes in what. Instead, I like to just have a homogeneous mix that goes in them all. Okay, so now our beer is mixed and primed. If I was to not bottle this right now, it would actually just raise the alcohol level. Artificially though, because it wouldn't be sugars and starches from the mash, it would actually just be from sugar. So it wouldn't add to flavor, just add alcohol. So next is we got to get it from there into these guys. And to do that, we put it on that box of elevation. We get out our auto siphon, and now this time we can go all the way to the bottom because there's no tube in the bottom to worry about. And we have a bottling wand. Now this has a little thing on the end. I finally got the one with a spring. And what you do is when this goes into the bottle, it can sit like that and nothing will happen. If I push down, now the liquid will actually flow. And you want to make sure you start it with it pushed down. So
are you ready?
I am ready. So it's best to do this as a two-person job because it's hard to hold everything all at once. It's flowing. It's good. Now the trick to doing this, you probably won't be able to see, but I'll move my finger with the level of the liquid. You can see it's rising up. When I get to about here is when I pull it out because that wand takes up a little bit of space. You see Derek has got another bottle ready for me because this happens quick and I don't like to spill it all over the place. Just go like this and boom. That way you fill to just the right spot. Now, like I said, I can just pause this. See, she's holding it down on purpose. But that way it's filled to about there, right in the top of the neck, just like we like it. We're gonna finish filling the rest of these. Be back in a minute. Okay, so we've bottled all of this and we got 4 wine-size bottles, 750s. We got 2 16-ouncers and we got 2 12-ouncers for 1.5 gallons. Not too bad. it's pretty close to a gallon and a half there. But what's going to happen to these now is they're going to go into what I call the bomb shelter, which is really just a thick plastic tub that we got from Lowe's with a lid. And we put all these in there. These are just a little bit too big for it. So I put them in a honeycombed wine box. That way, in case we get a bottle bomb, we shouldn't, but in case we get a bottle bomb, it's contained. It won't kill us. It won't hurt the cats. It won't make a mess all over the house. But what's going to happen now? Okay, like I started to say before, they're going to ferment just that little bit more. Maybe a week is all they need. Usually in about 5 days, these are done. And that produces carbonation. When you bottle beer or anything that you're naturally carbonating, make sure you're using something that has held carbonation before or is intended for carbonation. These are, you know, our fancy lemonade bottles from Aldi. These are Fleinsberger beer bottles. These we bought from the Beer and Winemaker's Pantry specifically for holding beer. So we know all these bottles are safe. Most of them have actually held beer before, like just a few days ago. So we know they should be fine, barring cracks, scratches, whatever. Just be careful. We hear a lot about people having bottle bombs and problems. I think just a little bit of preparation, using the right equipment, and doing it safely goes a long way towards not having a problem. Anyway, that's all we got for today, guys. Oh, on or about something in August, we made a beer. Not just any beer, a porter, a dark beer. I don't make light beers. I like dark beers. Now I'm gonna open it. Hopefully it doesn't. Okay. We had another one recently that just, it overflowed. Oh, see, this one's starting to go. Let me pour some.
Vaughn is excited.
It's pretty well carbonated. Look at that. Got a decent head to it. Retention seems to be good. It's not just going away. There's science behind that, and I forget exactly what it is, but it has something to do with proteins, I believe, that if the proteins are properly fermented and things like that, the head actually stays. I read something about that the other day. As you can tell, I'm such an expert on beers. I'm good at making them, and I know what they're supposed to taste like, but as far as like the science behind it, still learning. But anyway, this is my porter, and it really does look like Coca-Cola in the glass. It totally does.
It is super dark.
Oh, wow. Okay, if you remember, this was a bunch of different grains put together, and this has been sitting for a while, then we put one in the fridge, and we're gonna drink it. All right, so first thing, we talked about the head retention. It's still mostly there, as you can see. Smell. It's got a good, strong, malty, grainy, rich smell. This is, I'm really pleased with the way this one smells. Now, funny thing, why is this a porter and not a stout? Because it's only 3 to 3.5%. That's why. A stout is usually like 7, 8, 9, even higher percentage. This is low. This is meant to be drank, and you want to be able to have a few glasses of it without, you know, getting trashed. So that's why I make my porters usually somewhere between 3 and 5%. This one's a little bit on the low side for what I really like, but flavor is what matters. So I'm gonna try it. Oh, wow. It's just, there's nothing wimpy about this. It's strong. It's got a great flavor. It tastes like a stout. This is the one that's supposed to taste a lot like Guinness. I personally think it's a little stronger than Guinness stout. It's not as smooth. It's got a sharper edge to it.
Yeah.
It's bolder is what it really is. But if you like Guinness stout, you'll love this. Now, the first time I made this, I didn't add the extra lactose. I don't know how much of a difference that really made. I don't think it did much.
We have had a conversation with a fellow member of our VIP club about using lactose, and he found that he was having similar issues as we were, where it wasn't really dissolving in the liquid. So what he did is he put it in...
Yep, there it is in the bottom of the bottle.
Yeah. He put it in during the heating process.
He did it during the boil. I don't do a boil.
Right.
This was raw. So I could do it during the mash in. Just to dissolve it.
And that way it helps dissolve it and make it incorporate into the beverage more.
But if you like dark beer, you like flavorful beer, not just, water that looks sort of like beer, you'll like this. And the thing about this is it's really, like, if you make it yourself, it's actually really reasonable.
Oh, yeah.
The pricing on this. I mean, generally a 6-pack is like 10 to 12 bucks, okay? For a decent craft dark beer, it's 10 to 12 bucks, sometimes more. This, I think it was like $1.50 for a 6-pack. I mean, it's like nothing. We made a gallon of it, and I literally think it cost us, geez, I don't know, 12 bucks, 10 bucks, something like that. The same for a gallon as it costs for a 6-pack. That's so worth doing yourself. Buy the equipment once, you have it forever. Reuse the bottles. You can tell we just put it in a different bottle, but it's good. I like this.
Brian can continue going on about his love for dark beer, but the gist is it's good. It has all the requirements that you'd want to see in a beer. And
we didn't do tasting notes. We just said it's good.
A complex, multi-grainy.
Yeah. It's very rich. It has a strong, almost a coffee flavor, but not quite coffee. It has that roasted malt flavor that is, I like it. That's probably why I like whiskey so much, because it has that similar feel to it. Actually, that's a really good corollary right here. This tastes a lot more like whiskey than many beers do. It has a lot of the same components, even though it wasn't oaked. Similar components. The way the acids and the tannins are working in it actually tastes a lot like
I can see that.
Like a whiskey, a carbonated whiskey.
It's like if coffee and whiskey had a carbonated baby, it would be that.
Yeah. I can't really give you much more notes on it. It's just, it's very strong, but like I say, if you like Guinness Stout, you'll like this. It's just that good. Anyway, if you like this video, make sure to give us a like. If you want to see what we're up to all the time, hit subscribe. If you want to join our VIP on Facebook and get to interact with us one-on-one, join Subscribestar join Subscribestar or Patreon in the links below. Thanks for watching as always. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.